You're listening to Shooting Hoops with your hosts, Dia Miller and Adam Drexler.
Welcome back to Shooting Hoops, a podcast about basketball and the Portland Trail Blazers. I'm your host, Dia Miller, and I'm here with my co-host, Adam Drexler. I don't even know what episode we're on. Episode 7? Are we on episode 7?
I think it's episode 7.
I think it's episode 7. We are on episode 7, we're going to say.
We've come a long way.
We've come a long way. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and on YouTube. YouTube's been fun. I was a little hesitant about doing the video just because it's a lot easier not to and nobody sees you, and that's a little comfortable, but it's really cool. We get to put tweets up there. We get to show we're going to try some new things tonight with video. It's been kind of fun to do YouTube. So if you're not listening on YouTube or watching on YouTube, give it a shot. Go check it out on YouTube one of these days and see all the little added things you don't get to see if you're listening. We obviously are trying to make it just as much fun to listen to as well. So if you're listening on audio podcasts, we appreciate that so much. Adam, how are you? How are things going? You're back in Houston?
Yeah, I'm back in Houston right now, and it's going well. It's been a good month for basketball, and just enjoying life. How have you been?
I'm good. Tomorrow is my daughter's birthday. She's turning 10, and when my kids were little, I started this stupid tradition. It's not stupid. I call it stupid now because of all the work that it takes of blowing up balloons and leaving balloons all over the place. I finally smartened up a couple years ago and got a balloon blower upper thing, so I don't have to actually blow up the balloons myself with my breath. But every night before their birthdays, I fully regret ever starting this tradition. So that's where I'm at. We're hoping that that I can get that done when I'm done here. So yay for traditions.
Yeah.
So the Blazers are doing well. We are currently 5th in the West, sitting in a real good spot.
Not a bad place to be.
No, that is not the play-in. If we finished 5th in the West in the season, I would be real happy with that, to be honest. We are at 15-12, so 15 wins, 12 losses. That means we are over 500. And we are over 500 both at home and on the road, which is a big deal. It's a real big deal. How are you feeling about it?
Yeah, showing that we can win on the road it means that it's not a fluke. It's not just accidental. We're actually going out and winning. So, I mean, you love to see the Blazers play at this level. And now that Damian Lillard is back and he's been unstoppable, it's just a fun team to watch. There's so many different pieces of the puzzle, and they all come together to make an amazing franchise. So it's been really fun to watch.
It really has. So I'm throwing up there the last 3 games since we last recorded. So we played the Nuggets and we lost 121-120. It was a very close game. It was maybe the most frustrating loss of the season so far because I feel like it should have been a win. And I always have mixed feelings about those because it's good to lose a game that we could have won in the sense of we're playing good basketball, but it's also so frustrating to lose a game that we could have won. So it's a loss. Yeah. 121-120.
It all comes down to those last few plays, but ultimately I'll take a loss like that over a blowout loss to the Sacramento Kings or somebody like that.
For sure. And we had Dame hit a game winner. Just unfortunately, the Nuggets came back and hit another one after that. So, but then we move on to the Timberwolves, and we played them twice since we last talked. The first game, 118, we won 118-124. And then the second one, we won 112-133. And Dame didn't even play the whole fourth quarter of that game. So we are going to talk a lot about Damian Lillard and these games. But that was good. That felt good to win back-to-back games against the same team this week. That was fun.
If we beat the Timberwolves 2 times, it's convincing. That's why playoffs are best of 7, because generally the better team will win out. So whenever during the regular season you can have 2 kind of back-to-back games against a team, you can really see where your club is at, because it's kind of like a little mini series where you can see who can get the best 2 out of 3, or you break even. And if you beat a team 2 times in a row, that's a good sign.
That's a really good point that I've never really thought about. I mean, we play each team multiple times throughout the season. Obviously, the Western Conference teams we play typically 4 times a season, and the Eastern Conference teams we play twice a season. But we always talk about like who wins which, but I never really thought about it like that as like a mini series. That's a really good point and a really good like way to see how you measure up, like you said. So I guess if we face the Timberwolves in the playoffs, we're in good shape.
Yeah, and I think one of the things about those wins is the Blazers got the win against a team that didn't have Karl Anthony Towns, but they had D'Angelo Russell, Anthony Edwards, and Gobert, and it just even though they're missing their star player, it was still good to get those wins. And the Timberwolves they're a 500 team, so that's a good win. That's a quality win.
Yeah, it's not. Yeah, I think anytime it's a team that's not at the bottom of the, of the standings, that's really encouraging, especially 2 times in a row, and especially such good wins. We had really, really good wins.
Yeah.
Okay, so moving on to a little bit more news. This comes from the Portland Trailblazers PR. It says, official, the Trailblazers have assigned forward Greg Brown III to the Ontario Clippers, the NBA G League affiliate of the Los Angeles Clippers. So Greg Brown moves back down to the Clippers G League. I will be back there again this week on Thursday, which is in 2 days. So I'm excited to see some more Greg Brown dunks in the G League. I love that the Blazers are utilizing this. I'm sure that as a player, there can be some frustrations with this. There's obviously some differences in playing in the G League versus playing in the NBA. It's a very different experience. But that being said, like there's so much that he can benefit from this. And I'm sure he's aware of that. I think, he seems to have a good attitude about it. I know he seems to have good relationships with the guys on this team. You see that especially on social media as they're interacting, but you see it in person as well. And just really, I love that the Blazers are utilizing this option, because I feel like Greg Brown is somebody who has such a high ceiling. I think he's so athletic that if he can really hone his game, he's going to be really, really good. But this is going to give him the opportunity to do that. And I think in addition to getting all that playing time, the G League is a fast-paced league too. Like it's so, you watch the NBA and there's a lot of timeouts and there's a lot of pauses and there's commercial breaks and there's things like that where the game sometimes feels a little bit slow. The G League, it's like, I remember the first few games I shot, I would like put my camera down and they'd be like, oh, we're going again. Okay. And it's so fast. And I think that fast pace and that the more playing time he gets, that's going to be huge. But I also think another added benefit to this, especially the fact that he's with a different franchise in the G League, is he's learning a different way to do things. So he's been with the Blazers his whole career. I mean, he was drafted with them and he stayed with them. So he's getting to play with other guys. I know Xavier Moon, who has been with the G League, but also spent a significant amount of time with playing with the Clippers NBA team last season. He's a fantastic talent, and I know he's been working a lot with Greg. And I think some of those guys that he can learn from on that level as well, he's going to benefit from more people and more ways of doing things and seeing how other teams move and run and things like that. And I think this is really a good thing for both him and for the Trailblazers to be utilizing this.
For sure. I think the more experience you get with the NBA, amongst different NBA minds, it just makes you a better player at any professional level. I think my first year pro, I wasn't really an X's and O's guy. And my second year, I had a coach who, or after, doing the Rockets Summer League, I kind of developed more of a feel for how important it is to be an X and O guy and know exactly where. Before that, it was just raw talent and just going at people. But once you start to think about, okay, where can I be on the court? How can I put somebody in a position to make the easiest, most effective shot?
Right.
That can really elevate your game. And especially with NBA coaches, each one is so different that having that experience from another organization can really help you adapt to your current situation. I mean, Chauncey Billups he seems to be a coach who doesn't care who you is gonna play, whoever is effective and whoever goes out there and makes the most of their minutes. I really like that. So that combined with him being able to learn from other coaches on the go and quickly during the season can really help him make his stake in the NBA.
Well, it also puts him in a different spot. So, like with the Blazers right now, he's sitting on the end of the bench and he's barely getting minutes. He's playing very little. When you put him on a team like the Clippers G League team, he's getting a significant amount of time, which is, again, part of the purpose of the G League is to give that experience and that time. So he's playing a different role. Now he's coming onto this team where there are guys who haven't ever played with an NBA team. They've played in the G League. This is their first year, their second year, whatever. And they haven't had that experience. And Greg is not a veteran. I mean, obviously he's only been in the league a couple years, but he's the guy that has the experience versus when he's with the Blazers, it's the other way around. And I think that there's probably a sense of pride and leadership that he takes on that he wouldn't, with the Blazers.
Yeah, that's the the funniest thing about the G League is whenever players come from their NBA team to the G League, it's like it's a night and day watching them be like akin to LeBron James out there on the court compared to like when you watch them in the regular NBA. And it's because that's kind of what the G League is designed for. It's designed to get those players, get them the ball and get them touches, get them looks that, normally for the Trailblazers, the other players are getting most of the shots. You're not really going to get any shine offensively. You just kind of have to fit a role. But in the G League, you're put in the role of, hey, you're coming from an NBA team. Here's the ball. Go.
Right.
And a lot of players, they salivate at that opportunity. So I'm happy for him.
Yeah, well, and it's interesting too. I have a perspective that maybe nobody else really does on this because I am sitting on the court right next to the bench, and not just the Clippers bench, but sometimes the opposing team's bench. And so for more than one game, I've been sitting next to the opposing team's bench when he's come on the court or he's been talking trash or whatever. And I've listened to what the opposing players are saying, and they all know exactly who he is and they all know what team he's with. And it's always really interesting to me, that you hear the whispers, they're not really whispers, but you hear the talk of like, oh yeah, that's the guy that's here with the Trailblazers. Like that's Greg Brown. Like that they know too. And I think that's such an interesting dynamic that you see in this versus like he's made a name for himself already. People know who he is.
Yeah, it's always the worst part about that is that like being on the flip side of that and being in the G League and having to play against like an established NBA player who just comes in for a tune-up game or two, like that's a nightmare for them. So it's always interesting to see that perspective.
I saw that with James Wiseman last year. He came down, and Serge Ibaka too was down there for a while as he was recovering from injury. And so every now and then you see those guys, those veteran guys that come down and they play for a few games. And it's always really interesting to watch that happen. The other thing that I think is worth noting here about this whole situation, and then we can move on because I know we spent a lot of time with this, but the G League has a special place in my heart and I always love this. But the Clippers G League team is number one. They're currently ranked number one in the G League. They're the best team in the G League. So he's playing with some of the best players in the G League. And he's really like, not only is he getting more experience and more time, but he's getting that with really, really quality, talented basketball players. I always want to say, I know how we're talking about this, like he's coming from an NBA team and he's getting all these minutes and things like that. But I think it's always really important to reiterate the fact that the G League is full of players who could hold their own in the NBA any day of the week. They are there because of fit. They're there because of contract things. There's all kinds of reasons that the guys are there, but these are very, very skilled professional basketball players. And it's just, if you're not watching the G League, go follow this team. Go follow the
show
Clippers.
some love to the G League. The G League is so necessary, and a lot of people don't really understand why. But like me as a player, I understand the G League is such a great opportunity for a lot of players to who have been overlooked or need a second look. It's just an amazing place to be. So especially now when like the G League, a lot of teams are using their G League effectively, which is amazing for the NBA.
Yeah, it's definitely growing. And, you know, I've been saying since I've been shooting the Clippers team, I love what they're doing. I love just the dynamic. I love, you know, that I like a lot of the players on that team. I've gotten to know, I love their game. I love how they play. And I am constantly saying, like, if you're not watching the G League, go follow this team. Especially if you're a Blazers fan, because there's a lot of connections between these two teams for whatever reason. I'm not sure entirely why that is, but we tend to have a lot of players that kind of go back and forth. The summer league team, they've had players go back and forth. Keon Johnson, who's currently on our roster, was with this team. So go check out the Clippers G League if you're not following the G League right now. So. Okay, moving on from Greg Brown and the G League. Another kind of big thing going on right now, someone we need to be talking about, is the one and only Anfernee Simons. So this tweet also comes from Trailblazers PR. Also, if you're on Twitter, follow Trailblazers PR. It's literally at Trailblazers PR. Lots of really cool stats and things like that. Any announcements or whatever, they have them there. So it's a good resource. They said Anfernee Simons hit his 100th three of the season tonight, becoming the youngest player in the NBA with 100+ 3-point shots in his first 25 games of a season. So Anfernee Simons he's on fire. He's killing it right now.
He's the prototypical modern NBA player. I think the NBA is now in an era where it's very common to shoot a lot of threes, and you're expected to at the guard position. And he came into the NBA at that time, and that was what the game necessitated it because of Steph and Clay and all these other players that are winning teams. And Dame. And so him kind of being the under Dame's tutelage and getting to play against Dame every day has adapted that style. And as you can see, he's shooting the ball and he's taking a lot of threes and he's making a lot of threes. So
it's working for him.
I love that. I like to see it, and especially with him, I think he's done very well to carve out a role for the Blazers, where a lot of people kind of didn't know where he would fit or what would happen when he first came in. And to see him now, it's like it's just amazing to see.
Yeah, I feel like it was maybe 2 years ago, maybe 3. And we were talking about Ant, and there was all this talk. And I would just like to go on record before I say this as saying I was not one of these people. But there was all this talk of, wait, Anfernee Simons is supposed to be our backup point guard. Like, we need a backup point guard. This Anfernee Simons can't be the backup point guard. And I remember that narrative, and I remember being so frustrated with it because you're watching him and you're watching what he's already doing and the potential that he has and thinking, like, he can do this. And I remember very specifically Damian Lillard coming out and saying, that he was confident in Ant's ability to hold his own and to perform in that spot and to perform in that role. And he has, and he's exceeded, I think, a lot of people's expectations. And he's just watching the immense growth that had to have been in the last couple years. Cause that was after, I believe that was after I started podcasting, and it's only been a couple years since I started doing that. So that was just within the last couple years. And look at him now. Like he is not only is he more than capable as a backup point guard, but he's starting. He's coveted amongst the
Yeah,
league. You
he's
hear,
he's one of the I'd say one of the top shooting guards in the league right now. Like
yeah,
definitely top 10 shooting guard in the league right now.
like he's in talks to be an all-star, like, and
Mm.
he should be. And I feel like he's been in the talks both this year and last year as most improved. He is, and I feel like it happened so fast. I feel like it came from like people doubting him to the Anfernee
Mm.
Simons that we see suiting up every night for the Blazers now. And it's insane. It's incredible the progress that he's made in such a short time and the player that he's become in such a short time.
Yeah, I mean, you're special when you can skip college and play. So that alone always tells you have superstar talent. And luckily with the Blazers, he got to kind of foster that talent and get reps in. And because of how things happen, I guess he got time and confidence to really perfect his game and figure out how he's going to go about this NBA, career.
Yeah.
And a lot of players don't really get that luxury to kind of figure out and get the confidence and get the, green light to go out and play however they want to play. And he's gotten to do that a few times over the years. And it's just all of that is a combination of works that just boost your confidence. And now he's ready to contribute when the team is in full performance.
Well, and I will never stop singing praises. What's the saying? I always butcher these sayings. I don't know why.
Singing praises,
Singing praises.
hollering praises,
that
shouting
seems
praises.
that seems, maybe I need a better term for that. But I will never stop giving credit to Damian Lillard for his part in this too, because I feel like even just thinking back to that moment, I feel like for me as a fan, that was a somewhat defining moment that had to have been impactful for Anfernee Simons to hear, to know, because these guys follow the narratives that are attached to their names and the things that are going on. I mean, I'm sure having been in this world, like you are aware, right? Like they follow that, right?
I give a lot of credit to Dame as well, because I think when you're the star of a team, he could say, you know what, I'm Damian Lillard. I'm going to take 40 plus shots a night,
right?
And you all can just get the scraps of whatever's left.
Right,
That's for you all, but my 40 shots are for me. He could have done that. But no, he chose to be a leader, a real leader, and share the ball, and not only share the ball, but really feed the hot hand. He's okay with other players on the team stepping in and shining.
Yeah.
Which you love to see. It's something that reminds me of my father. A lot of people had these comparisons to him and Michael Jordan. And when they talk about statistics, I mean, if you look, one of the most important things that I look at, and they're both phenomenal players, but they played entirely different games.
Yeah, for sure.
Where Michael Jordan's throwing up 30 plus shots a night. My father, maybe 20.
Yeah.
So, and my father's game was always to get his teammates involved, always to kind of run the offense and make sure that everyone is contributing so that they can win these games. Whereas Michael's role on his team was to shoot the ball.
Right.
And that was it.
Right.
The team was built for him to do that. My father didn't have that kind of team, so he had to adjust his play style. And because of that, he was able to lead his team to the finals.
Yeah.
And Damian Lillard's doing the same thing right now. He could be taking 40 plus shots, but he's not. He's sharing it, and now they're sitting fifth in the conference. So it's equating to wins.
And I think too, like you look at a moment like that where, you're Anfernee Simons, you're still young in the league, and you have this narrative following you from people talking about this team that like maybe they need a different backup guard, and this whole thing is going on, and you're aware of that. And then you have Damian Lillard, who is the starting guard, who is the star player, who is Damian Lillard, who sits in front of the media and says, against all the other narratives that are playing, nope, I believe in him. He can do this. He can handle this. That has to do something. And now obviously Ant is the one who gets the credit for the work. He's the one who gets the credit for the skill. He has built and worked to be where he is, and he gets all the credit for that. But I think that there also has to be some, the kind of team that he's on and the kind of leadership that Dame brings to this has played a part. And I think that there's something so cool about that. And I've said before, it's kind of a funny thing because I think there are a lot of players, or maybe not a lot, maybe I should say some, but where he's essentially training his replacement. He's essentially putting himself in a position where someone could come up and the team could theoretically say, well, Anfernee Simons, we don't have to pay him quite as much. We're going to trade Dame and we're going to go with Ant, and he could work himself out of a job. But he's not, he's still, now that's not going to happen.
I don't think Damian Lillard will ever work himself out of a job.
No, that's not going to happen. But my point is, like, he's not being selfish in this. I think Dame has always taken the role of a team player and a leader. And I think we see that in Anfernee Simons' development and in the player that Ant has become. But massive credit to Anfernee Simons for ending up as the player that he is. And I think that this little thing right here is kind of an interesting thing on this tweet, is an interesting play on that. This comes from the official NBA account. It says Damian Lillard and Anfernee Simons poured on the buckets, finishing with 67 points combined in the Trailblazers' home win. Damian Lillard had 36 points, 8 assists, and 2 steals. Anfernee Simons had 31 points and 5 3-points. Sometimes those numbers, when they write them like that, get confusing. I was making sure I read that right. So it's 36 and 31 points between 2 guards. Like, those are huge numbers. Those are really big numbers. And that was against the first Timberwolves game. So really, really good to see that.
Yeah. I mean, like, having two guards, they can kind of, stuff the stat sheet in the backcourt is really helpful to a team because those two people have the ball in their hands and they can distribute pretty well. So just having those two being able to catch fire and play off of each other is really important.
Yeah. So speaking of Damian Lillard, let's talk about Damian Lillard for a little bit here, because my goodness, this man has been playing basketball. Damian Lillard currently, well, let's put this up there. This is a big one. Damian Lillard. This is from the last Timberwolves game. It comes from the Bleacher Report account. It says Dame in 3 quarters tonight, 38 points, 11 threes, which ties his career high, and 13 out of 21, shooting 13 out of 21. That's insane. That's in 3 quarters. He didn't even play the 4th quarter. And just for the record, had he played the 4th quarter, he for sure would have beat his career high of 12 3-pointers, which would have also been a franchise high. He holds the franchise record right now at 11 3-pointers in a game. And the NBA record is 14 in a game, which is held by Klay Thompson from, I think, 2017.
Yeah.
So that if he had played that 4th quarter, and everybody, like, if you watched the in fact, I think I have it here. If you watched Twitter as this was happening, the tweets that were coming in, Brandon Sprague tweeted 4 more Dame threes, please. Kevin Durant posted, this is an interesting way to do it, but he posted hashtag don't, hashtag take, hashtag Lillard, hashtag out the game. Kevin Durant was not here for taking Damian Lillard out of the game. Sean Hyken says, we want Dame chants starting to come up both in the arena and on Kevin Durant's Twitter account. And Will Blackman, who's a football player and a football commentator, said Dame is 11 and 15 from 3 in the 3rd. He needs to relax. So lots of talk about Dame during that game in his 3 quarters of success that was wild to watch.
Yeah, that's one of those days where you just like, you wake up, the air feels fresher, the grass is a little bit greener, your body just feels a little bit lighter, the cereal tastes a little bit better, and you go and make 11 threes.
Right. I mean, that's never happened to me. The grass has been greener, the cereals tasted better, but I've never made 11 3-points. That's wild. It's just wild. And if you heard him talk in the post-game interview about how he knew it was going to be one of those games. And I think Chauncey made a comment about that as well, that he knew it was going to be that kind of game for him. Lots of talk about, and I'm actually really curious about your thoughts on this as a professional basketball player. I know my first reaction when they pulled him out of the game was, put him back in, let him make the last three, let him break the record, like let the guy go. But we didn't need him to play. We were very comfortably ahead and very clearly going to win the game. He had gotten kind of kneed in the thigh, I think, briefly before that. So he wasn't, I think he was hurting a little. Tell me your take on this before we get deeper into this. What's your take on the whole coming out with one stinking 3-pointer to break the record?
Yeah, the numbers guy in me wants to see the record broken, and I'm sitting there saying, okay, yeah, come back in and just jack up some threes.
Right.
But the other part of me is saying, my father used to say this. My father said a lot of things, but my father told me that, a lot of games during his season, he would not play the fourth quarter because they were blowing out teams, like half the games that they played. And he always told me that was like the biggest achievement, was that he didn't have to play in the fourth quarter.
Yeah.
And so it is kind of an achievement. You've 38 points and you don't have to play the fourth quarter because you just dominated that much. I mean, that's a testament to you and your abilities. So I think that's kind of a flex in and of itself.
That's fair. Fair.
But then I also saw there was one time where my father was trying to break his point record, and the coach put him in and like ran 4 plays for him just to score. So, I mean, it depends. It depends on how you're feeling that day. But I think it was up to him. I think usually the coach will look at you and ask if you want to. And I guess Dame was just like, you know what? I've done enough today. I'm going to relax.
This is before we continue on this specific one, because there's more to this and I want to keep talking about it. I've got a couple of quotes here that I want to bring up, but I'm going to go off script a little bit here, because this is it's even a little bit off of Trailblazers, but this is an interesting thing that's been kind of a topic of discussion lately. And I really want to hear your thoughts. Cause again, one of the things I love about this podcast specifically is like, we have very different insight. I'm a fan. I never played at a high level, but I'm around it a lot on in some capacity, but you are a professional basketball player. You have played the game for years on a high level. And not only that, but you're the son of a NBA Hall of Famer. You've obviously, as you quote him regularly and things that he said, you have some really interesting insight. So there's this whole thing that's been a topic of conversation, and we have to talk about it, even though it's not a Trailblazer thing. Did you see the Zion Williamson dunk the other day where the game was over? They were playing the Suns. The game was over. It was done. And his teammate lobbed the ball down the court, and Zion did just a massive dunk.
Yeah.
And the Suns were heated. They were mad. So this has been kind of a topic of conversation. And on that same note, I heard Richard Jefferson recently was talking about this same type of topic, where it was at the end of a game like that, where, typically they kind of just dribble the ball, run the clock down. But one of his teammates needed an assist to get a double-double or a triple-double. And so Richard was like, well, I'll shoot the ball. And so his teammate threw him the ball. He shot it. He made the point. his teammate got the triple-double, whatever, double-double. I don't know what it was. And so he was talking about how like sometimes you do those things to get those stats because the stats are important and the entertainment value is important. He didn't say that. I'm saying that. But I saw the Zion Williamson and I was like, that's fantastic. Like, yes, do that. It's entertaining. As a fan, like, we're not talking about, this is maybe controversial, but I'm going to say it anyway. We're not talking about high school basketball where you don't want to hurt the other team's feelings. We're talking about professional basketball players who are getting millions of dollars to play a game, and they like, go guard him. If you don't want him to dunk, go guard him on the other side. And that's my piece. But I'm curious because I'm speaking this as a fan. I'm speaking of this as a fan.
I get where I do get where you're coming from. And
that was so good.
In the case of Richard Jefferson, my clone, I do think that if I had a teammate and he was about to get a triple double and he needs a bucket, I'm gonna shoot that shot.
Right.
But the other flip side of that is that most players, I mean, we're all gamers. We all play the game because we love the sport. And it's something about like, okay, if I go and if I want to win a game, am I going to go and play against someone who's going to be competition? Am I going to, play against somebody who's going to push my skill and really make me feel like a winner? Or am I going to go play against, my neighbor's kid and get an easy win?
I'm playing against the neighbor's kid.
it's like some people, some people be like, you know what? It doesn't matter who the opponent is. A win is a win.
Right.
I've always, for me as a gamer, I want to play against a competitor. I want to play against someone who has the potential to beat me, because that will make the win that much better. So at the end of the game, by the way, it was a nice dunk. But
it was beautiful.
It was. I'm not gonna lie, it was a nice dunk. If I was on the other team's bench, I'd have been like, that's a pretty nice dunk. But at the same time, it's like an unwritten rule.
I know it is.
That if you can't do that in regulation, don't do it at the end of the game. I mean, it's just it's like a freebie. It's like, hey, that's a fancy 2 points that, it's way more amazing if you could do that during the game when it matters. If they were down,
Zion could do that in the game?
Absolutely. But I mean, just think about how much cooler that dunk would have been if they were down 1 and he caught a steal on a fast break and did that to win the game. How cool would that have been?
So
but
cool.
Like, it's so much. So less cool when you do that at the end of the game when you've already beaten a team. So
what maybe you can give insight here to why the Suns were so angry. Why do you think that? Like, what is it? Just the adrenaline?
It's an NBA rule to just not do that because
it's unwritten though, right? It's not like a legit rule.
One of the other reasons is that the NBA it's a physical sport, and a lot of players, their body is their tool for making money. And if you're at the end of regulation and a team is beat, it's generally like the only bad things can happen if you continue to play. You don't want to
get injuries.
So a lot of players will just hold the ball, let the shot clock run out, and get back home to their families or get back home to rest. And when you sit out there and play at the end of the game and try to run up the score, it's just it's unnecessary for both parties.
Okay.
So that's why a lot of players get mad about it. It's something I would never fight anybody about.
Right. There were some players that were about
I wouldn't have to go into a brawl about it, but I would just, sit there and look at you funny because why?
Right. Okay, that's fair. I appreciate the insight. I think, I always think of it, obviously, because I am a fan. I'm thinking of it from the perspective of a fan. And I'm watching this and I'm thinking, that was fantastic. Like, I want to see that on a loop. And it's actually funny because Greg Brown has done this as well. He's gone down at the end and done some fancy dunk. And we've seen that happen with him as well. So I know that it happens. And I also, when the Zion one happened, I played devil's advocate with myself. And I said, now, Dia, if this was against the Blazers, if the Blazers were in the Suns spot, would you be okay with this or would you be pissed? And I really, really tried to like dig deep, Adam. I dug deep on this. And I think I'd be fine with it. Like, you're going to lose anyway. Look at the cool dunk. So from a fan perspective, I'm getting so worked up. I got to chill here. I don't know why I'm so like...
To me, I'm like, it's something that it gets people's blood flowing. I mean, it's just, it's such a... It's like you're either one way or the other way on it.
Right.
But in the NBA, most people, they take it so personally, they'll never talk to that player again.
Yeah.
It's like such a big deal.
This is how rivals are made.
Yeah.
Like, this is now 10 years down the road, people are going to be like, man, I don't know why the Pelicans and the Suns are rivals. It's just always been that way. And it's going to go back to that one time that Zion dunked at the end of the game.
Yeah, it's... I don't know. To me, I'm like, obviously, I don't know Zion, but like, I'm pretty sure he didn't like. He's not a bad guy in my.
No.
And so it's just one of those things where you just kind of, I don't know how to feel about it. I wouldn't appreciate it if that was the other team, but at the same time, the whole losing and getting beat is the part that makes me feel terrible.
Right.
Like, I'd feel terrible way before that.
Yeah, if your team's winning and somebody does that and it's inconsequential, you're probably not really going to care. But he did, just for those listening and for you, I don't know if you heard this, but Zion did actually say in the post game that he let himself get a little carried away and that he probably shouldn't have done that. So just to the people who are upset about it. It's good insight. It's good insight, Adam. So back to Dame, who did not do this. Back to Dame, who sat out the fourth quarter because he didn't need to play. I'm going to jump over here to this real quick. We've got Pinwheel Empire, who tweeted, damn, doesn't look like Dame will get to break his record tonight. And then Nate Jones, who is Dame's he works with is that his agent? I know he's his partner in the Moving Souls, the company, but I think he works with him on another capacity as well. Anyway, he tweeted, it's not Dame or Chauncey's style to push for a record when in a blowout. So obviously, there's some insight there with somebody who knows Dame and Chauncey. And you're exactly right in what you're saying, that this just it wasn't worth it. And I want to hear your thoughts on this, but before that, I want to read one more. This one comes from Casey Hodal, who is the Blazers beat writer. He quoted Dame. Dame said, that would be the thirsty thing to do, Damian Lillard, on whether he wanted back in the game in order to set the franchise and NBA records for 3-pointers in a game. So that's the picture that we've got here of this whole Dame not going back in. But man, it would have been fun to watch it happen. I even had a tweet ready. I was like, it's happening tonight. And I was ready to go. And then, no, it did not happen.
There's always next. I'm sure there's plenty more basketball for Dame to play where he's going to have a chance to break that record.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Along the lines of Dame, before we move on to a couple other players and some other things, we're going to circle back to Dame again at the end of the podcast because there's some big stuff coming up with him. But I wanted to highlight real quick, JJ Redick went on Taylor Rook's Bleacher Report podcast and Damian Lillard came up. And I thought this was worth mentioning. It's kind of interesting. JJ Redick said, you can't tell me Damian Lillard is not an effing winner. I'm not going to say that word. And yes, he doesn't have a ring, but I would say that guy is a champion. He's a champion. So I find this really interesting because this is always a topic of conversation. Can you be one of the greats? Essentially, can you be a champion without ever winning a championship? And this is definitely a narrative that has circulated around Dame. If I am not mistaken, I believe JJ Redick never won a championship, which I think is an interesting insight to this quote coming from him. But I like to hear this. I always kind of say like a championship is a team thing. You can't win it on your own as a player. You can do everything in your power to win a championship, and you can be the best player in the world, but if you don't have the team around you or the right pieces or whatever it may be, you don't win a championship. Does that make you not as good? I tend to say no, it doesn't make you not as good. I think that a championship, again, is a team thing. I think your accolades and other things around that have more weight. But again, I'm coming from a different perspective, so I'm curious about yours, because this is also a line with your dad, because he stayed in Portland and fought to try to win that ring for so long, and then eventually went to Houston and did it there. So I'm curious about your take on this, on these comments about Dame and just in general.
Yeah. This is where it kind of gets tricky, because like, yeah, on one hand, Dame is a legend. Make no mistake about that. He is a legend.
Right.
But winning is a big deal in the NBA. I think all of these like players compete for one thing, and that championship. And it is a team sport, but I mean, individual accolades. Yeah, Damian Lillard will go down as a Hall of Famer,
right?
And he's going to be remembered for many, many years as one of the best Blazers to ever play, but one of the best point guards to ever play. Forget Blazers, but in terms of championship, I don't think so. And maybe JJ has other insights into this, and JJ was a phenomenal shooter, but championships they're exclusive. That's an exclusive club. That's why it's so coveted. You've seen players like Dwight Howard sacrifice a lot to go and pursue a ring. You've seen players will go and pursue the ring because it's just one thing that you can add to your resume that is so elusive. That's why my father ended up pursuing his championship with the Houston Rockets. It's such an achievement to win the whole thing. He'd gone to the finals 2 times before that, and they just couldn't get it done. And then he finally goes and gets it done with Hakeem. So that championship means so much to him. And I think Damian Lillard, I'm not ruling out the possibility of him winning a championship sometime in his career.
Yeah.
But right now, I think it's okay to not win a ring, because he's still going to be a legend.
Yeah.
His game is still appreciated, especially by me. I love his game. And I think the Blazers,
this is hard for you.
It's tough, because I'm like, to me, I root for Dame all the time.
Right.
No one wants him to succeed more than me. It's just championships that's like a separate bracket of the there are players who are not legends who have won championships, and it's just something that you can. It's an exclusive club,
and I think that's where this whole conversation gets me, because you have guys that, like, people, even basketball fans, wouldn't even recognize their name, but they have a championship ring because of the team that they were on. Maybe they barely even played or contributed, but they have a championship ring because of the team that they're on. To me, you have a guy like Damian Lillard, and I hate these comparison games. I don't know how I just backed myself into this corner, but you have a guy like Damian Lillard who has done so much and who is really a stellar player, and is doing things like making it into the top 75 players of all time. And then you're going to tell me that guy's less of a champion than a guy that won a championship ring and didn't contribute that much. Like, I think that's where I get caught up. But you're right. I guess you do draw the line somewhere, and you have to draw that line somewhere. And that's a very black and white thing. You either win or you don't. Like, there's no you kind of won.
Yeah, Charles Barkley. Like, no one's debating whether or not Charles Barkley was a good player, a great player. But every time he gets up there on the panel with Shaquille O'Neal and Kenny Smith, I mean, they have championship rings.
Man, if you're looking for a career in sports media, like if you're a Charles Barkley and you know that this is the direction you're going, at the end of your career, you better just leave. Like, you better just, if like Dame, we'll use Dame for example, even though I don't think any of this applies to him. But if Dame is like, you know what, I want a career in sports media when this is all over, if he doesn't win a championship with Portland, he better find somewhere where he can go win one, because you do not want to deal with years and years and years of ridicule from Shaq.
Yeah,
You just
it's a
don't.
tough place to be, but at the same time, my father, the one thing he always has on his hand is his Hall of Fame ring. Every now and then he'll have the championship ring, but the one that he wears all the time is the Hall of Fame ring. And I think at the end of the day, that is the more important personal achievement. Whereas the championship is just like, hey, this team was a great team.
That's fair. That's actually a really good point. Like, you do have things like the Hall of Fame that you can be inducted into, obviously, without winning a championship. So you're right. There are different measures, and a championship is obviously a very specific thing. I guess the only way to settle this is that the Trailblazers just need to win a championship, and then this is, and then
that would solve both.
It would solve everything. I mean,
I think my dad, he always said that, people have asked him in the past, like, hey, why don't you ever wear your championship ring? He's like, well, this Hall of Fame ring, this, what this means is that I'm one of the best to ever do it. Ever.
Yeah.
And to him, that's a more incredible achievement. The championship is amazing, but at the end of the day, it's like, hey, who can say that they're, one of the best at something?
Very few people.
That's very few people. So, that's just like, that's a huge honor.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, that's good insight. That's fair. Okay, couple other things here. Shaedon Sharpe. Let's talk about Shaedon Sharpe for a minute. He is getting more minutes. We've seen more play from him. There's a tweet. I don't know why it's not showing up here for me, so I can't put it up there, but I'm going to read it. This tweet comes from Nate Jones as well. And he said, Sharpe's minutes will be good for his development, but you can see him thinking and hesitating more and more out there now that teams know the basics of what he can do. The NBA game is hard. I thought that was a really good insight. You do see some hesitation there that I feel like we weren't seeing as much of before. And that was good insight. What do you think about that, Adam?
Yeah, like we said before, I think being a rookie and getting minutes is a big deal. Getting consistent minutes is tough as a rookie, but he seems to be kind of going through his ups and downs of his rookie season. But through all of that, one of the biggest takeaways is that he's been able to shoot. He's hovering just under 50% field goal percentage, which is incredible. He's at 46% right now, I believe. And as a rookie guard, that's a big deal to be efficient and be able to put up meaningful stats. So, and then you watch him every other play is spectacular athleticism, his decision making. But I think that's really good for his development. And like we said earlier, Chauncey's the kind of coach that he plays whoever is going to be contributing the most. And now that Shaedon seems to be getting more minutes, that Chauncey has confidence in him, which I think will in turn give him more confidence. Yeah. But he's also seeing the other side of that now. Yeah. It's like, okay, see my minutes decrease. All right, I got to make sure that I bring that same level of consistency all the time, which I'm sure he's up to the challenge.
Yeah. It's insane to see how he's performing. He's so good. And I think it's only going to go up from here. When you think about the fact that we're 25 games almost into the season, and he's already playing the way that he is, it's just so good. He's so good. And I'm really excited to see, how he just improves. But I do like that he's getting more minutes again. That I like to see that. Nurkic. Let's talk about Jusuf Nurkic. Nurk is one that it's like when he struggles, people just pile on him. But then he'll have great games, and I feel like we don't really hear about the great games. But he's had a couple really, really good games back to back. I believe you actually sent me this stat. I think 15 and 16 rebounds. 15 in one game and then 16
against Rudy Gobert, who is one of the best rebounders in the league. If you can go out there and get 16, 15 boards against him, you're doing an incredible job, because he's built an entire career out of rebounding.
Yeah.
So, and then also I saw there was this one play where Gobert actually went up to try to make a post move on Nurk, and Nurk just straight up took the ball
Yeah.
out of his hand.
Yes. It
And
was so good.
you love to see it. And I think people forget that he is a huge part of this team, and he's not the reason why his numbers are not popping out to anybody is because he's not getting as many shots per game. He's shooting around like eight or so shots a game, which means he has to, if he wants to get like big numbers, he has to almost have a perfect
every single
game.
one. Yeah.
So that's a really tough position to be in, but at the same time, he seems to be still doing a tremendous job on the rebounds. He's, I think, leading the team in rebounds, which is incredible. He's over 10. And on top of that, he shoots the highest percentage on the team at 60%, wow. I believe. So whenever you have a player that can kind of be consistent like that, especially knowing, we all know that he can do more. Right. So that's just a really big help.
Yeah. He's been fun to watch these last few games. I feel like, and I say this over and over and over and over again, but when Nurkic is on, he is on, and he's fun to watch, and he contributes so much, and you really feel the difference that he makes when that's going on. When he's having a good game and when he's playing well, you can feel the difference there. And I feel like that's what we've seen the last couple games. I think okay, there we are.
Oh, yeah.
I feel like that's what we've seen the last couple games is he's just been consistent and really having good games. And it makes a difference. It makes a really big difference. Yeah. Justice Winslow is another one. I think you were talking about him.
Yeah, he's playing, like, if you look at the numbers alone, yeah, it's not, jumping out at you, but I think it's worth noting that when you have a player like Justice Winslow who can come in and get you 10 assists in a game, get you 6-7 rebounds, 9 points, and he had exactly that in the last game, and he's flirting with a triple double on any given night. When he's given the role of playmaker on the team, he can just kind of fill in and make the team go. Yeah. So having him as someone who can play make, to get Dame and Jeremy Grant and basically everybody on the team, get them open shots. You've seen a few plays where he's thrown lobs up to Shaden. He's got everybody involved, and that's something that we all know he can do, or I know he could do because I've seen him do it. Before he got to the NBA, and that was his real role. And he's a big body. So, I mean, there is just really no disadvantage to having him out there. So, I think it's worth noting that he can do that. And he's a Swiss Army knife.
Yep. Yeah. I feel like we keep calling him that on the show.
Yeah, that's what I'm calling him.
Someone needs to adopt that and like market that. But it's interesting with him because I find myself there are periods of the game where I'm like, man, it's things that it just feels like a well-oiled machine. Like there are times where I find myself watching and it feels like that. And a lot of times when I realize that and I look at who's out there, he's on that court. And I think that Justice is one of those players where obviously his stats are good. Like you said, he's close to a triple double often. But on top of that, I think he makes a difference on things that you maybe don't measure so much with stats, like things that you don't necessarily see on paper, you feel when he's on the court. And I love the Swiss Army knife thing because he really does. He really can fill so many different roles and do so many different things. And he's one of those guys that when he came to the team, I think there were a lot of people who weren't super familiar with him, even though he's been in the league for a substantial amount of time. I think that people didn't really know where he was going to fit. And here he is just really playing a key role with this team. And one of the guys that now I look at it and I think we don't want to lose him. He's making a difference.
Yeah. I think I'm glad that he got the chance to go to Portland because I mean, he's watching his NBA journey. He's kind of just bounced around teams, and a lot of teams don't really try to utilize him in that way. They just kind of put him out there as like a 3 and D kind of player, and he's really versatile. And I think a
Yeah.
lot of NBA teams never really tried to experiment with that. I think at one point the Miami Heat did try to experiment with him at the point, but I think he was also hurt for the period of time during that. So we didn't really get to see it. And him coming to the Blazers, I think it's also a credit to him. He knows that, hey, I bounced around the league a bit, and this is a year I really have to show teams that I can bring a lot to the table. Otherwise, my future's uncertain. So I'm really glad he established himself with this Blazers team.
Yeah, same. I think that that's something that's kind of unique about this team is at least as of the last few years, I feel like they really allow people to come in and find their own. I think part of that is because we have players who are flexible and who, you have some of these teams, and I don't want to name names or mention specific teams, but if you're listening to this, you can probably think of a few. But you have teams where the roles are very established. You're not messing with this guy's role when you come into this team. You're not messing with this guy's role when you come into this team. And I think with the Blazers, even though maybe those roles are established, like obviously you have Damian Lillard, who's going to be your number one guy. Like that's not a question. But Dame doesn't mind taking a step back and allowing someone else to kind of fill in some of those roles or find their own or figure things out. And I think that that's one of the things that's been really kind of beautiful about this team, especially this year, as we've seen so many different combinations and players playing different roles. We've talked about Josh Hart doing that. We've talked about Justice Winslow doing that. And these guys that are kind of finding their own voice, I guess, not literal, obviously, but they're kind of figuring out where they fit and they're not having to do that while bumping up against someone who's pushing back. Like there's some ebb and flow to this team and the roles and the positions and things like that I feel like is not super common. I feel like that's something that's kind of rare and something that we do really well.
Yeah, it's definitely uncommon. I think this is one of the few teams I've ever seen it on where the coach is okay with players with putting players in different positions.
Yeah.
So normally on a lot of teams, like a guy like Justice Winslow would have come in and the coach would have been like, all right,
right.
I've seen the last team you were with, you were kind of like used as a 3-and-D guy. You're a 3-and-D guy, and that's it. Nothing you do or say is going to change my mind. And whenever coaches do that, they kind of build up their own perception of you, and it really can hinder what you can bring to the table because I mean they've already made up their mind. I've had a few teams where like I've come in and it was all fun. And like, of course, basketball is basketball, but like I've had teams where, the coach will be like, hey, you're our 3-point shooter now. There. Now, like half of our offense, we're going to design plays to get you threes. And I'm sitting there like, I can shoot a 3, but I've never been the primary 3 shooter. That's not, my thing. But like a lot of coaches will have that perception just because like, okay, I think the first practice we had was knocking down 3s.
Right.
So, and that was just, I was feeling it that day. I mean, but from that point on, he just kind of decided that was what my special skill was. And but that's really,
and he's seen coaching. You dunk because I'm just saying, like,
I've had moments like that, but I've also had times on teams where, my coach, I think my second year pro, my coach was like, hey, we need you to be more of a playmaker. We need you to get guys involved and kind of, be our, primary, playmaker. And that kind of pushed me into a new role to experiment with that. Because prior to that, it was just like, score, or, find my way through the offense. But with that, I found myself setting guys up and running things and getting people involved, which elevated my game. And sometimes it's trial and error, but with Chauncey, I think he is trial and error. He's just like,
he's
okay,
willing to do that.
He's paying attention in practice, which I love, because if you pay attention in practice, players will often play how they want to play and you have a little bit more freedom. So I think Justice showed him, hey, I can make plays, I can pass, I can do all these things. And Chauncey's saying, okay, you know what? He can do it. Let's put it in the game and try it. And I love to see that from coaches.
Yeah. It's really cool to watch that happening Okay, so a couple things that are coming up in these next few games or these next couple weeks, I guess. Gary Payton Jr. is set to finally make his. I say that so dramatically, like we're not only 25 games in, but Gary Payton Jr. is set to make his return. According to Shams, that should be in the next 1 to 2 weeks. So soon we're going to see Gary Payton Jr. finally in a Trailblazers jersey.
He's waiting for Christmas.
Yeah, his Christmas gift to us all. Gary Payton Jr. in a Blazers jersey. Hey, look, I'll take it. That's a great Christmas present. Some Blazer wins, some good defense. I'm here for it. So we've got that coming up. The other big thing that's coming up is Damian Lillard is very quickly making ground on your dad's record. I mean, we all kind of knew it was going to happen this season, but we're looking at and you know, if for those of you who are listening, if you missed the episode, we did a few episodes, I think it was episode 3 that we did with Clyde, where he talked a little bit about this. You should go back and listen to what he had to say about Dame beating his record potentially. There's some good stuff there, but yeah, it's coming. Now, I was looking at the schedule, and I would love to see this happen in Houston because that's where you and your dad are based. And it would be really cool if he got to be there for that. And it just seems like Houston would be the easiest way to do that.
Yeah, I think that would be a really cool moment. I'm sure my dad would love to come out and check it out and be there for that, which that would be phenomenal. And I think like we've talked about before, like of all the people, Damian Lillard is the one that you want to break your record. And in this modern era, like you are supposed to score a bunch of points. That's what the game is kind of catered towards. It's no longer, you don't have to put hands on people anymore. Like there's no hand checking. It's a game that has allowed for more fluid movement on offense. So I think Damian Lillard has taken advantage of that in today's NBA, and he's thrived on it. And it's fun to watch. So I think the record is going to be really cool. If he can do it in Houston, it's an even bigger bonus.
Yeah, Houston.
Wherever he does it, it's going to be amazing.
I think they're 3 games away. I think we're 3 games. I think we have 1, 2, and then Houston, I believe. And then I think he's like just over 100 points. I want to say it's like 110, 112, something like that. That is from beating. I think it's 112. I think it's 112 from tying and 113 for beating it. I should have looked this up before we recorded. But so if you figure if he has a couple 40-point games, he could do it in Houston. So we'll see.
Yeah.
Maybe you should go to that game, Adam.
Yeah. I'll check it out.
I'm thinking. So I want to, Dame was asked about his thoughts on this. So we've got the clip. You haven't seen this clip, so it'll be interesting to see what you had to say about his comments on breaking your dad's record. So I'm going to jump to that here really quick, if I can do it right.
Everybody here knows this, it's documented that I've always said I want to be the best. I want to be the guy where when they say who is the best to come through here, I want people to look and say it was Dame, and obviously scoring isn't everything, but when you start to get up in these types of numbers, that's a major thing. So, and the fact that it's Clyde Drexler, anybody who knows the history of the NBA is going to respect and honor that. So, being a part of one organization for this long, and being able to sustain this level of success and to catch a record like that it means a lot, to be in that position. And once it does happen, I think it'll be just a major step in, even further in the direction of being what I want to be, as far as being a trailblazer. And it's a major accomplishment.
Yeah. So good words from Dame there. What do you think?
I like that. He wants to be the best. Who doesn't want to be the best? I mean, if you don't want to be the best, you need to find another sport.
Another job.
That's the attitude you love to have as a competitor. And I think, like Damian Lillard, when it all is said and done, I don't know what the Blazers are going to do in terms of playoffs and contention, but Damian Lillard will go down as one of the best Blazers of all time.
Yeah.
Of course, I think, in my personal opinion, there's still a little bit of room that there are a few things he has to do to kind of get to that next level of conversation as best Blazer ever. But right now, he's the Blazers, he's the champion of the Blazers right now, and this is his moment, and you love to see it. Now, if he can turn that into some finals appearances and break out of the West and win a championship, then if he wins a championship, then you can put him up there as best Blazer ever. But I mean, right now it's just, why not appreciate the moment and appreciate the superstar?
It's one of the things that I've really liked as I've watched this all play out, and I've watched, this approach and the talk of this, because this has been talked about, it was coming. And I think everybody kind of knew that it was coming. And this conversation, I believe, started up really last season about how this was coming. And I really appreciate the respect that you can see in the way that Dame talks about this. He obviously has a lot of respect for your dad and for that record. And I think just listening to him talking about it, I've always really appreciated that. As somebody who as a kid and growing up, so much of my fandom revolved around Clyde. I think it's really cool to watch Dame talk about him that way. I think about this sometimes, like, the Blazers haven't won a championship since the 70s. They've won one championship in the franchise history. And sometimes it's really easy to kind of get caught up in that. That didn't happen in my lifetime or your lifetime. But I think about the fact that growing up as a kid, I got to watch Clyde Drexler play for the Portland Trailblazers night after night after night after night for my entire childhood. And now, as an adult, I'm getting to watch Damian Lillard play for the Portland Trailblazers night after night after night after night. And I think sometimes, to have two big franchise players like that in my lifetime who really loved the team, who were incredible players, amongst the best in the NBA, and who were loyal and who stuck it out and who had long careers with this team that I love. Two of them in my lifetime. There are people who go their entire fandom, their entire lifetime, and never get one player like that. So I that's not lost on me as I watch this all play out, the parallels to, and I think a lot of this especially is because I have a child who is about the age that I was watching your dad. She's now watching Dame. And I went back to my own childhood there for a second, and I see the parallels in her fandom. She said to me the other day, she said, "Mom, if Dame ever leaves the Blazers, like, I don't know if I could be a Blazer fan anymore. I might just have to be a fan of the team that he goes to." And I remember being that little kid that when Clyde went to the Rockets, I became a Rockets fan for while he was there because I was a fan of his, and she is a fan of Dame's. And I see those parallels, and I see the parallels between the two of them. And I think for me, that's part of why I love this so much. And I love seeing this play out is there's just so much. It's just really cool. It's really cool to watch that happen. And I love this attitude. I think I won't name names, but there are a couple players in the NBA that I think of, like, if this guy was the one that was about to beat this record, this would be a very different conversation. And I love the fact that Dame has always been respectful. He's always been, just very respectful is the best word I can think of to use, but just really good about that in this conversation. And I think that that's really a great thing.
Yeah. I mean, Dame is one of those players who's kind of like helped to showcase this modern NBA and this new type of scoring. I think a lot of people, they compare eras, which is a weird thing to do because it's entirely different games of basketball that were played. My dad's era, you could put hands on guys. People weren't really shooting threes. The 3-point line had just come out. I mean,
Right.
It was an entirely different game. And now we play in an era where players are encouraged to shoot a 3-point shot, which when my dad was playing was considered a bad shot.
Right.
So, I mean, I appreciate both. I think both are fun to watch. And I find myself constantly watching games and modern games, and then going back and watching old games from the older NBA. And it's just, you got to love the sport and have a respect for it to really appreciate what Damian Lillard's doing. Because, I mean, even though it's kind of a different NBA, I mean, breaking a record is still a big deal. We see it with LeBron James and passing Kareem. Like, that's incredible. Of course, it's the modern NBA, but I mean, passing a legend is a pretty tremendous feat.
Yeah.
But that doesn't take anything away from either player.
No, absolutely not. We're really fortunate, to get to watch Damian Lillard doing what Damian Lillard is doing. So, all right. Well, this has been long. We talked longer than I anticipated that we would. But there's been a lot of good stuff tonight.
To be talked about, had to be discussed, especially the Zion dunk.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I needed to know, Adam. I needed to know.
I mean, for anyone watching, what is your take? Tell us on Twitter. How do you feel if you're in the game? If you're the Phoenix Suns, how would you feel if that happened to you?
Yeah, I am curious about that. And I think that, again, like, this is something I want to do more of. Like, tweet at us. I'm at Deandra Ann. Adam is at Drex Glides, and then the number 2. And we want to hear what you have to say about this whole situation or anything that we talked about. And we very well may use it on, I kind of pull tweets from random things that happen, but if there's questions or interaction, I'd love to bring those on and kind of do that here. So make sure you're subscribed to our YouTube channel. Again, if you're not listening or if you're not watching on YouTube, you might want to check it out. We throw some things in there every now and then that you're not seeing, obviously, on the audio version. So subscribe to our YouTube channel, to our podcast feed on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you're listening. Make sure you're subscribed so that you don't miss episodes. Make sure that you rate. We would love if you would rate it. That helps us. Rating, comments, sharing, all that stuff helps us to keep this going. And that's, this kind of stuff always feels silly, but when you're doing something like this, that's what drives it. So please love us. Thank you so much for listening to Shooting Hoops. We will be back with you next week.
You're listening to Shooting Hoops with your hosts, Dia Miller and Adam Drexler.